The stunned face of 5-year-old Omran Daknish, the image gone global that captures the horror of Aleppo, pounded by Russian and Syrian warplanes. Doctors in Aleppo fight to save the life of a woman and her unborn child. Tonight, another shocking insight into the emergency rooms of Syria's biggest city. Good evening. The fact images of a stunned 5-year-old boy went around the world so quickly may or may not have prompted Russia's agreement to a 48-hour ceasefire next week. The UN has welcomed it, but the bombing of Aleppo in recent days has been shocking even for those in the city who've suffered so much. Tonight, will these pictures have the same kind of global impact as those of Aylan Kurdi last year, the boy who washed up on the beach in Turkey?
Also tonight, it's that time of year, A-level results.
Me and him, we got into our places that we wanted. I'm not saying I'm the greatest of all time, but I'm somewhere close to the greatest of all time.
For many years, black and ethnic minority students have outshone white working-class kids. But a report out today shows that society failed young black Britons in their working lives. On Rio's iconic Copacabana, the Brownlee brothers win gold and silver today. The government hopes that their achievements will inspire children into healthier lifestyles. But is it better to apply cash into elite sports that promise Olympic medals rather than grassroots organizations that may never yield any? And the American swimmers who embarrassed their Brazilian hosts by claiming that they had been robbed at gunpoint in Rio. But was it a case of booze, lies, and security videotapes?
And from the jungle in Calais, the extraordinary journeys of unaccompanied children fleeing war and heading for Britain. We meet the Afghan boy who left his home and family because the Taliban ordered him out of school. Every so often, one image comes to symbolise a story. The pictures of 5-year-old Omran Daknish, stunned and bloodied after being pulled from the rubble of a bombed building in Aleppo, spread around the world in a matter of hours. As Syria's biggest city is pounded by Russian and Syrian government bombs, the UN peace envoy called again today for a 48-hour ceasefire to allow in aid. Russia said it would comply, but the impact of its bombing on children like Omran will be much longer lasting. In a city that has sent out so many images of death, it is the picture of a 5-year-old carried out alive that has so captured Aleppo's agony. Silent, stunned, Omran Daknish. A tiny child, alone, in the back of an ambulance, trying to work out what has happened. No crying as he reaches for his bloodied head and wipes away the mess as only a 5-year-old would. More children are brought out. We know Omran's 3 siblings were also rescued. And we know their parents were among the adults stumbling alive from the wreckage. Their apartment in a rebel-held suburb collapsed completely shortly after this. Last year, it was the images of Aylan Kurdi washed up dead on a Turkish beach that galvanized international concern. Tonight, it is the haunting face of Omran Daknish going out around the globe. He's been released from hospital, but what now for his life? And how long will the world remember him?
Well, the filmmaker Waad Al-Khatib has remained in Aleppo to document the suffering of its people caught up in the siege and under regular bombardment. Tonight, like last night, her film is at the top of our program. It focuses on one woman, Maisa, who at 9 months pregnant was injured in one of those airstrikes. But it features too the phenomenal dedication and skill of the ill-equipped doctors and nurses in the city's hospitals, who battled to save both her and her baby's life. And a warning, this film contains graphic and distressing scenes inside the operating theatre. Everything you're about to see happened over 48 hours in July in Aleppo. On the streets outside, the sound and fury of war. The toll that day, 45 dead, dozens wounded. but inside the reverential concentration of a makeshift theatre. The woman on the operating table is called Maisa. She is 9 months pregnant, and she was caught up in one of the bombings when she was on her way to hospital by foot, close to labor.
بس فرجيني امسحيه بالشاشه جسيه بايديك في شظيه؟ ما في خلاص بس بالمشرط من المشرط اعطيني شفره بايدين احسن.
In the explosion, she broke her right arm and leg. What the doctors are concerned about most is the shrapnel in her belly. Did it kill her baby? They want to perform an emergency cesarean. What you're witnessing is the fight to save one new life in a city that is more used to dealing with untimely death. On the streets outside, the few living are pulled out of the rubble. In the operating theatre, the fight for life appears victorious. But there seems to be a problem. The doctors fight on. They're now in danger of losing both child and mother. The struggle to save new life is visceral, instinctive. Perhaps because outside, death comes so easily. Oblivious to events on the street, the existential battle inside the theatre soldiers on. A doctor clears the baby's airways. The child hovers between life and death, much like Aleppo itself. Then the umbilical cord twitches. Proof of life.
شو قصة الطفل؟
اسم الطفل مين؟ هيك توردت صار ورقي بس شو مدير يعني كثير مالك حاليا
الله أكبر.
And the most elemental sound of all.
لا تكون عافية.
More powerful for a brief moment than Aleppo's daily cry of death.
عمرك يلا خلص هذا اكسجين بس
اشرب.
الحمد لله بعد نعاش أكثر من 3 ساعات تقريبا. الحمد لله مثل ما شايفين. كان واقف. حاليا الحمد لله.
ابكي.
Dr. Ahmed, who brought him into the world and saved his mother's life, is exhausted.
يعني باعتبار أنا عجوز
سلامتك يا حكيم بالعكس شوف الشباب
والله يا وعد رجلي بتتشنج الم بالليل ايام بصيح بس بخجل اصيح مشان ما يسمعوني الشباب بكتم صياحي شدة هي
متجهين الان بحاله جيده ولله الحمد. لفي
The war almost ended his life before it had a chance to start. But the war will continue to be his companion and shape the world that he has entered. We'll be reporting on the situation in Aleppo on Channel 4 News in whatever way we can, every night for the foreseeable future, as this relentless battle continues. We again today asked for an interview with the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, or any other Foreign Office minister about Britain's policy on Syria and the government's relationship with Russia. But again, no one was available.
Now, someone who knows all about human suffering in Aleppo is Dr. David Knott. For more than 2 decades, he's spent time as a volunteer trauma surgeon in war zones, including Syria. He's trained numerous medics on the opposition side in Aleppo as part of an effort to spread medical knowledge about how to treat the worst battlefield trauma cases. When he's not in Syria, he often consults via phone with the few medics still working in areas not controlled by the government. Thanks for coming in. And you've actually been in touch with the doctor who treated the boy, Omran, who we saw at the top of the programme.
Yes, he was in M10 hospital in Aleppo. It's a name that is a secret name, but he was in M10 and he brought there and he was treated by one of my friends who cleaned his wounds, the large scalp injury, and which was sutured, and he's doing fine now, which is great.
Now, we've just seen that incredibly traumatic piece of film about the woman and her baby. I presume that's what it's like pretty much all the time if you're there.
It's like that. It's like that every day. I mean, you're getting casualties coming in, multiple casualties of the worst horrendous wounds you could possibly imagine, and lots of children. When I was there, 70% of the casualties brought in were all children. They're all civilians. There were no fighters. There were nobody else. It was just purely civilian population that have been totally targeted.
You talked about being targeted, the hospitals being targeted in the past. And one of the big problems is so many doctors have been killed.
Yes, when I was there was 5 of my colleagues were killed. Altogether, in the last 5 years, there's been 700 doctors having been killed. There was 28 hospitals damaged in July this year. Last week, there was 5 hospitals completely targeted. The hospital I worked in, one of the hospitals was underground, was hit by a high-energy missile, directly targeted, and 70% of that hospital is also not working now.
Now, people looking in on this from the other side, the Russian side, there are people on social media on the Russian side saying, these kinds of images prop up terrorists.
Well, that is completely not true, because what's actually happening, if you're bombing civilian populations, those children get no education, nothing, what they're going to do, they're all going to become refugees. And I reckon if this continues for another 5 years or now, we're going to get 1 million people which have been killed, 20 million people refugees, and you're not actually affecting terrorism, you're causing terrorism by bombing all these people.
There are relatively few people in Britain who've got the kind of experience in Aleppo that you have. I mean, have the government been in touch with you, or ministers? No,
nobody, unfortunately, has been in touch with you. And I'm pleading almost to our new government, with our new Prime Minister, Theresa May, that she really needs to make a direct appeal now to Russia. She needs to make a direct appeal to President Obama. She needs to get them together around the table, because in reality, believe it or not, those two are the only people that can stop this war.
I mean, do you think Britain really has any sway here? I mean, aren't we insignificant players?
Well, Sir John Majors created a no-fly zone in Iraq during the Kurds when they were chemical bombed. And now is the time. I think if we retract ourselves and sit in a corner and don't do anything at all, then we will look as a very weak nation. But we're not a weak nation. And if Theresa May has the same mettle as Sir John, then we should start doing something.
So you don't think the answer is military action? It's not that you want Britain to come in on the side of the rebels?
No, I don't. I think what should happen is that the Syrian regime, there should be a no-fly zone for the Syrian regime. They should stop their barrel bombs, because that's what's killing all the people there. Of course, Russia is fighting as well, but Russia is saying that they're not attacking hospitals or civilians. Well, let's just see if they are or not. But the governments the world needs to get together. I mean, the world got together with the Olympics, and we're looking at sport all as a world. We should be compassionate and look at this as a world.
David Knott, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Matt.
Chris. It's A-level results day, and the story has been one of success for the vast majority of students. The pass rate of just over 98% is the same as last year, and record numbers of places have been offered at universities. But there are continuing concerns over the performance of young working-class white boys, with black and ethnic minority pupils regularly outperforming them. Simeon Brown has been to a school in Hackney to find out why.
It's that time of year again.
What's that? What is that? The whole thing?
And if school was a long time ago for you too, Results Day may have a tinge of nostalgia attached. But for the class of 2016 at City Academy in East London, it's the first day of the rest of their life.
It just feels so good to like get in and prove
pass.
everyone wrong.
Society
and
as
pass.
well.
Yeah.
Especially because we're from a not privileged area.
Yeah.
But we're going to be in the same classes as people that go to very posh schools.
Exactly.
Most of the students here are from an ethnic minority background. They've done well, part of a wider trend in educational attainment in this borough and across Britain. 10 years ago, the road behind me was called Murder Mile, and I probably don't need to explain why. Back then, the schools in this borough were amongst the worst in the country. Now that picture has completely changed. Money has flowed into the schools, and so have the opportunities. Schools like this have a large black and minority ethnic population, but they appear to be doing well, and they're more likely to be heading to university than their peers who are white, male, and on free school meals. Today, the Equality and Human Rights Commission said they had the lowest education attainment of any ethnic group. Since 2008, all ethnic groups in Britain have seen an increase in their proportion of degree holders. Figures show that half of British Indians now hold a degree. This compares to just over 1 in 3 of black Brits. And nearly 28% of Pakistani and Bangladeshis also have degrees. But at the bottom of the list are white Brits who've just a quarter educated to degree level. But the cleavage in education is also drawn along geography. In London, where students are more likely to be from an ethnic minority, pupils receive £1,300 more than their northern peers. So what is behind it?
A lot of progress has been made since the 1990s on closing ethnic minority achievement gaps, and so therefore by age 16 actually white British students, particularly boys and disadvantaged boys, find themselves further behind. Less success has been had in terms of closing gaps that are to do with socio-economic disadvantage than the ethnicity gaps.
So white boys on free school meals, they've just been missed out.
I think it's been a case of other groups accelerating faster.
Mark and Shamira are off to prestigious art schools and see themselves as beneficiaries of London school improvement.
I've come from a single parent household with my mum, and that's one stereotype in itself, let alone coming from Hackney. And sort of from day one got good GCSEs, got decent A-levels, and now going to probably one of the best art colleges in Europe. And it's sort of, if you really do put your mind to it and you have the support there from the school that we have and from your family, you can make it no matter where you come from.
But that's the thing, where you come from and where you live are still big factors in educational outcomes. The improvements seen here need to go further than the capital.
Well, if young black people are doing better in school than their white counterparts, they're still finding the cards stacked against them when they enter the world of work. The Equality and Human Rights Commission says there's entrenched race inequality across society, with ethnic minorities more likely to live in poverty than white people, while black workers with degrees earn 23% less than equivalent white employees. Our senior Home Affairs correspondent Simon Israel reports.
These 4 young people, 3 of them graduates, have, between them, made more than 60 job applications in the past few months, all without success. They instinctively feel they are up against systemic race inequality.
My mum always said to me that I need to work twice as hard as anyone else, possibly even 10 times harder just to get to the same level. And I feel like I'm good on the applications, but as soon as I walk through the door, I think they have in their head, okay, she's black. That might not necessarily always have a negative impact, so sometimes it might work in my benefit, but I don't think it always does.
To be quite honest, I don't really feel that much racism towards the fact that I'm black. It's over-trumped by the fact that I'm also Muslim. So that comes above anything else. The first thing that they notice is not really my skin colour or the fact that I'm a girl, it's the scarf that I'm wearing.
My chances are very slim. One, I'm a Muslim by name and by faith, and also I'm brown. That puts me at quite a disadvantage.
Is this, do you think, more in your head than in reality, or...?
Well, if you look at this report, it's clearly alive and it exists.
Today's report from the Equality and Human Rights Commission reinforces these beliefs. The report argues ethnic minorities and their white compatriots live in two different worlds. The number of young black Asians who are long-term unemployed has risen by nearly half in the last 5 years, and yet for white young people it's fallen by 2%. A black worker with a degree is paid 23% less on average than a white worker with a degree, and the unemployment rate for ethnic minorities is nearly 13%, twice the rate for white communities.
Whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's the criminal justice system or employment, young BME people are treated less well, they earn less, and their chances of progression are considerably smaller.
In 2005, the then head of the commission warned the country was sleepwalking into segregation. 11 years on, today's review by a new head didn't go that far, but nevertheless has painted a bleak picture.
The party of one nation...
And the one nation chime from the last government is barely visible.
My view is that the one nation approach is a bit of a fig leaf, and we need to be really clear about what is actually happening in real terms.
We will do everything we can to help anybody, whatever your background, to go as far as your talents will take you.
No more platitudes is the Commission's message to Theresa May, who on entering number 10 last month vowed to help everybody, not the fortunate few.
Well, joining me now in the studio to debate the issues, Barbara Ntoumi from the National Union of Students Black Students Campaign, Dr Tony Sewell, founder of the charity Generating Genius, which supports high-achieving students from disadvantaged communities, and the young entrepreneur Solomon Ian Sangala. Tony Sewell, why is this happening?
I think the word is that there is, and we can't deny it, institutional things that are going on here in terms of discrimination. No one would be naive to say that that wasn't happening. But I do think that what happens to those graduates when they leave university is interesting. I do think that there is a sense of not having the networks, not having the just the whole kind of social capital to be able to then engage in getting work.
To capitalise on your degree?
Yeah, I mean, one example quickly is just, for example, that there are professions that are just logged into Oxbridge. And whoever you, and what happens is you spin out of that world and you take your friends with you and you reproduce that. That is really going to be difficult for poor children, black or white, really kind of dealing with the market. And I do think that is one of the key issues of blocking the progression for those graduates.
Barbara Ntoumi, I mean, do we just have to be more open about talking about racism?
We have to be more open about talking about racism, and we also have to enforce the law, because racial discrimination is illegal. And it's the same as so many cases. If the government don't enforce the law, i.e. pick up on the wire, graduates with the same, both with degrees in a firm, why is a white person being paid more than a black person?
Well, why do you think it is happening? I mean, how does it happen?
It's racism. It's
I mean, there are starting salaries for jobs. How do you end up with a quarter
in the
less?
same way that you have the gender pay gap, you have exactly this thing. Me and my colleagues don't sit down and compare our wages. I don't think that anybody's being paid more than me because they're white, but that's the problem in institutions where you have the black people being paid less, because we're not even open about how much people are paid, and that's part of the problem. If the TEC has to do research to find this out, I bet you loads of black people that work in places where white people are being paid more aren't even aware that this is a thing that's happening to them.
Solomon, you sort of bypassed it by starting your own business.
Yeah, I started my own business when I was 14, bespoke clothing, and I've been doing that for 4 years now.
Do you feel that there are obstacles out there that you can't get over, or do you think this is all stuff that doesn't apply to you?
At the time, I did feel like there were some obstacles that did apply, because I come from a council estate black as well, and I've been through a lot myself. I've got to stutter, so if you play this all together, you start seeing that everything is against you. And I thought that I had to like break out of this myself, and starting my own business put me into a bracket where I'm in charge of my own self, and no one can tell me that I can't go to this university because I didn't get a grade.
Is this the only way people can escape?
There is an issue, you know. There's an obligation on the universities. They're getting these students into their institutions. What almost is happening is it feels a little bit like a degree factory, with not the element in there for certain students. And some of these universities, particularly let's put it by the non-traditional ones, have got quite a large percentage of ethnic minorities in there. What's not happening is they're not really teaching those students how to succeed in the real world. And there's an obligation almost for those universities to do more. In fact, even within the universities to create businesses. Cambridge University is an interesting example of that one, where they actually even have spin-off companies around the university. And that's how you even had your Facebook and your Microsoft people moving from Harvard into some those kinds of things.
So
need to
do you
happen.
think black students are being ripped off?
I think ripped off is the wrong
Well,
word.
they're paying for their education, and they're getting a degree that's worthless.
The degree isn't worthless. I think you and I have had degrees. I don't think they're worthless. They're actually premium. What isn't happening is that extra value that those students need to succeed in our society. And we know that the job market is not just about applying. It's about who you know. It's about how to network.
But the extra value also come at a cost, right? Because we're paying £9,000. Loads of black students live in 80% of the poorest areas in this country. We come from working class backgrounds. Most people have to work in order to survive in university. So it's great to say, oh, network and do other stuff, but where is the time when you're being literally squeezed to the bone?
Politically, this has fallen off the agenda, hasn't it? I mean, politically, all the talk has been about the white working class and the impact of UKIP, and the Brexit debate has all been geared towards that. It's kind of unfashionable to talk about racism now, in truth, isn't it?
I think that there's. I don't think it's unfashionable. I think it's a case of being accurate about where this thing's going. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with you that, in fact, it's necessarily all about stacked against those students. I do think that what has to happen is that you have to empower the students. And, in fact, you have to empower them earlier than university.
Well,
you have to go.
I mean, the evidence shows that even you know, when people enter school in schools, you know, black students and white students are off the same level. But as soon as they enter the school education system, not alone college, and then get to university, they're being failed a long time off. I don't know what more a university can do really in order to enable that.
I feel like university doesn't really prepare you for life, or school doesn't really prepare you for life.
I mean, you haven't got to university.
Yeah, I haven't gone to university.
So your qualification to say that is what?
Yeah. But from my experience, I've run my own successful business. I've been doing this for quite a few years now, and not many people I know my age are doing what I've done. And not many people are on TV or going into these big networking events, and I've met loads of big people out there, and they always say that getting a degree is the best thing that you can do in life, and I don't really see it.
No, I 100% agree. For black students, and in many ways, if we want to really address the issue of racism and for black students to progress, we must have the opportunity to enter higher education. We must have all these opportunities. But, you know, education alone, it's not about getting a job. Obviously, that's really important, but it's also becoming a more aware and engaged observer of society, really, for you to be able to participate, for you not to be able to just take things at face value, and that's also part of it. I don't think that it's unfashionable to talk about race. I think, you know, black people have been pushed and pushed down of saying you kind of should be grateful that you're here anyway, so don't talk about race. But it's something we must continue to force the agenda.
What can you do is the trouble. If you're 23, you've done a degree, you're struggling, you still can't get a job, what can you do about it if you're a black student?
I think that what you've got to do, really, in any case, I mean, Solomon's got one idea, is to look to your own business. But I do actually think that you've got to really kind of begin to sort of think about building a confidence to really go after those jobs. I actually don't know whether, in fact, the issue is totally about a system that is blocking you. Do those students really understand how to engage that market? I mean, that's the key, I think, to this. What do you do? What do you do to get the success?
I completely disagree. I mean, TUC's own research says if you have an African or Asian signed in name, you have to send 3 times more applications in order to be considered. So before you've even got through the door with your degree, somebody's seen your name that they can't pronounce because they can't quite work out the alphabets, and then you're not in.
I think the issue for A-level students is also about the kinds of degrees you're going for. And really, in a sense, are we, for example, business degrees, are they
We're going to have to come back to that question another time, but thank you all very much indeed for joining us today. Matt.
2 officers from West Mercia Police have been placed under criminal investigation after the death of the former Aston Villa footballer Dalian Atkinson. Mr. Atkinson died after being tasered by officers in Telford in the early hours of Monday morning. The Independent Police Complaints Commission says it has served 2 officers with gross misconduct warnings and says it'll investigate the level and type of force used by the officers. Channel 4 News has learned that the leader of UKIP in Wales, Nathan Gill, is under investigation for potential fraud by the police and EU authorities over allegations that he misused his expenses and allowances as an MEP. More on that is our political correspondent, Michael Crick. Michael, what more can you tell us?
Well, the police and the EU authorities are looking at Nathan Gill's 2 years in the European Parliament and asking whether he used EU money for party political UKIP purposes or for his own personal use. In both cases, it's strictly against the rules of the European Parliament. In particular, they're looking into a long list of complaints made by a man who used to work for Nathan Gill in his capacity as an MEP and is currently in legal dispute with him. Now, this whistleblower, I've spoken to him both yesterday and today, says that one of his allegations also involves 2 other UKIP MEPs. Now, North Wales Police, we contacted them about Nathan Gill, and they gave us a statement confirming that they'd had allegations of fraud against an Anglesey man, and they said that matter is now under investigation. Now, Nathan Gill is known to live in Anglesey. I've also spoken this evening to another former employee of Mr. Gill's, who's also in dispute with him, and he told me that if he's contacted by the police, then he is willing to back up many of the allegations made by the first whistleblower.
And what's Mr. Gill got to say about all this?
Well, I rang him tonight and he said it was the first he'd heard about it and that he couldn't comment until he's contacted by the police. A close ally of his told me it's utter nonsense and politically motivated. Mr. Gill is an ally of Nigel Farage and is part of the current civil war, really, that's going on inside UKIP. In particular, there's been a lot of controversy about the fact he's got 2 jobs, both as a member of the European Parliament and of the Welsh Assembly. And indeed, Neil Hamilton, the leader of the UKIP group in the Welsh Assembly, has called on him to stand down from one of those jobs, which Mr. Gill refuses to do. Strangely, yesterday, Mr. Gill announced that he was no longer going to sit as a UKIP member of the Welsh Assembly, but as an independent, even though he's still leader of UKIP in Wales as a whole.
I think I got all that. Michael, thanks. Krish.
Now, it's long been a source of shame for Europe, and especially for Britain, the number of young unaccompanied children trapped in the jungle refugee camp near Calais. Just 52 children and teenagers have so far been allowed into Britain under EU regulations. Charities say that more than 200 others could qualify to be resettled here, but few have cases in progress. Today, council leaders from southern England visited the camp to witness the children's plight at first hand. Our reporter, Porrick O'Brien, is also there and has been meeting some of the young refugees. Porrick.
Whatever you think about the giant refugee and migrant camp here in Calais, just the other side of the port, one thing is for certain. It is a constantly changing thing. It's organic, like a small city. And every time I come here, I notice those changes. This time round, we noticed that it had geographically shrunk, but that the population of the camp had dramatically increased. So the density of people on the ground was startling. The other thing that struck me, the number of children, and particularly the number of children that are alone, that also struck us. That's the granular stuff, first to the air, and a bird's eye view of the jungle. From a small rural airstrip in Kent, in just 20 minutes to the migrant metropolis. The jungle, Calais, now has all the trappings of a small city. Businesses, families, charities, crime, districts, and children. Lots of them. From up here, you really get a sense of the sprawling nature of the jungle camp. Ironically, though, over the last 12 months, it's actually shrunk in terms of its geographical size, as French authorities have put the squeeze on. But the density of the population has increased dramatically. One activist group that surveys the population of the jungle put the figure a few days ago at nearly 10,000 people. Now, French authorities dispute that figure, but the numbers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And with it, some unique problems around its density. To get a sense of that, though, you don't get it from up here, you get it from down there. We're not here for the bird's eye view. We're here to tell the story of Container 114. The White Container District is the new official bit of the camp surrounded by the tented city. Container 114 is home to 6 Afghans. These are hard men with hard memories. Do you remember that day?
Yeah, I never forget, because we had very good time and bad time in Helmand province. You know?
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wafa, for example, a translator for the US Army in Helmand. Container 114 then. 6 people. 5 men. 1 little boy. Some pretend to be younger here to get preferential asylum claim treatment. Shafi is 11 though. We agreed not to show his face. If we did, you'd mistake him for 8. You will, though, be able to hear the small, frightened voice. Shafi, when did you arrive here in the jungle? How long ago?
1 year.
Oh, you're here for a year, are you?
1 year.
Okay. And where is your mum and dad?
In Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan. And why did you come here on your own? Shafi is from Kunduz in northern Afghanistan. Says the Taliban insisted he stop attending normal school. His parents used smugglers to try to get him to his uncle in the UK. But this is as far as he got. The men of Container 114 have adopted Shafi. No one has adopted Lala Rai yet. He arrived alone yesterday, and talks of war in Afghanistan more matter-of-factly, with hard eyes. Every so often, though, being thought cool by the other boys, a smile breaks out and lights up the room. Behind him, in the charity's Kids Cafe, a London bus, and a list of the missing. The population here is in a constant state of flux, so numbers come with a health warning. The UNHCR, though, is going with a population of children of about 800. They say that around 600 of them are unaccompanied. There are 200 children here with family, we're told, in the UK. Not all of the cases, of course, are as straightforward as the ones we came across. Today, a delegation of local authority leaders visited the camp. An attempt to highlight the administrative logjam that seems to be preventing the safe passage and the fair distribution of more children who are alone in the camp to local councils in Britain. What exactly is the problem here with getting unaccompanied kids out?
Talking to the refugee organisations that are here this morning, we've heard a lot about bureaucratic problems where different sets of information are required under different international treaties, and different governmental organisations are blaming each other for not having that. But the key issue is we know this camp is likely to be demolished sometime in the next couple of months. There are lots of young people here who have an uncertain future, so we need to find a way to resolve that quickly.
The Home Office says it's trying to speed this up, and that last year 3,000 claims for asylum were made by unaccompanied minors. How many have been taken this year so far from the jungle? 52 since March. Lots of numbers, difficult to put in perspective. Except for one boy, and the number he'll never forget, 114.
Nutritionists and health campaigners have accused the government of missing an opportunity to improve the health of Britain's children through its new anti-obesity policy. The May administration has dropped plans floated by David Cameron's government for curbs on junk food advertising. But are ministers also failing to do enough to promote healthy living by channeling cash into elite sports rather than grassroots activities? Here's Kemi Nzera.
Alistair Brownlee in the triathlon with another gold for GB. His brother Jonathan, second for silver. Svelte, model Olympians. Let's face it, not many of them have an ounce of fat to spare. And just like in 2012, the government's hoping they can inspire the public to swim or cycle or run to good health. Who wouldn't be inspired by scenes like this? But today's long overdue obesity plan has been given the proverbial red card by health campaigners. No mandatory reductions in sugar, no bans on advertising junk food, and a funding climate that spent record amounts on elite sport while letting the grassroots sink or swim. Like this community leisure centre in Shropshire, threatened with closure because of cuts to local government, with no other pool for miles around.
We enjoy it a lot, and we go enjoy it a lot. We go swimming, don't we? We go swimming.
It seems crazy to threaten to close something that is going to be their upbringing and their source of leisure and fitness training. I mean, the Olympics is great, but so much money has been put into top athletes. We need it at the bottom as well.
While central government funding for grassroots sport has gone up, the figures are dwarfed by the challenge on the ground. Recent cuts to local government sports funding are eye-watering. The LGA estimates it collapsed from 1.4 billion in 2010 to 1 billion this year, and it faces a further drop to as little as 650 million by 2020. Shropshire Council are typical in needing to save millions over the next few years. They told Channel 4 News they know that leisure facilities like this one are very important to their local communities. But where is the joined-up thinking? Not just for obesity and physical fitness, but mental well-being too.
I think the impact on adult social care, on mental health issues and the National Health Service will be absolutely enormous. Really short-sighted taking any funding out of here.
Well, guys. The grassroots leisure industry has been forced to look for new sources of money. That's what they've done here at a kids' sport summer camp at Paddington Recreation Ground in London, and it hasn't been easy.
It means that we cannot really rely on funds from the local authority anymore because the funds aren't there. So it means going to national governing bodies of sport or other charities to try and get the funds from them to run projects such as these.
Tackling the obesity epidemic is, of course, about much, much more than just what you put in your body. Good food, bad food, sugary food. It's also down to how much exercise you do, how much running around. And at grassroots sports facilities around the country, it is a very mixed picture.
And from public health to public adoration. On the wall at the Paddington Rec, a plaque to the local hero who trained here as a kid. And in Rio, could there be any doubt, it's not just sweat and tears that won these medals, but also cash, lots of it. So where, campaigners are asking, is the money to get us back home fit too?
Well, Connie Henry is a former GB triple jumper and bronze medal winner at the 1998 Commonwealth Games, and in 2011 founded the Track Academy, a sport for social change program. Thanks for coming on the program. So sweat and tears and cash. Is enough cash going to grassroots organisations like yours in order to produce these medal winners that we now all celebrate?
Well, the correlation isn't quite there. The cash goes in at the top, as it should do, because we need the medal winners. They inspire us. They inspire the nation. More money does need to go into grassroots, though. You don't take away from the top, from these medal winners. We want those stories. They get people out of their front room and onto the tracks or all around the nation, onto their local fields. But we do now need the funding to come into grassroots. But when it gets there, Matt, it's about what happens to it when it's there. And is there a clear programme? Is there a clear journey when the money comes in, to whether it's the volunteers or whether it's just young people. What is their journey from coming out of their front room to just being active?
So the problem is not so much the amount of money or the distribution of it, but actually the application of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from track and field point of view, there are almost 1,400 track and field clubs up and down the country.
So there's enough grassroots stuff.
Well, we have the infrastructure,
Yeah.
but when they're there, the funding in those clubs and the expertise within those clubs, so that if they got a pot of money to say, look, we need to tackle obesity, the expertise within those clubs isn't there actually at the moment to turn those track and field clubs into community hubs, and that's when we start to tackle obesity.
And what about the relationship between these grassroots organisations and schools? Because it's the schools that are the most controversial part of this.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I say with all these track and field clubs up and down the country, if you have the expertise in the clubs, their job is to engage the schools, engage all the local networks, even engage organisations like the NCT. How are we going to educate parents to help young people with nutrition? The club system, in track and field specifically, is there and it's robust, but it needs help, it needs funding, plus the expertise with the funding to do more.
But when the government is cutting back on things like, local clubs, the councils are cutting back on stuff, surely that's just withdrawing the infrastructure that you need in order to get these kids to be more healthy.
Absolutely, but at the moment the pathway isn't there. So they're withdrawing money from a system that doesn't work, but the system doesn't work because it hasn't actually been looked at properly from a strategic point of view. This is what we need to do. These clubs need to become community hubs. They need to reach out to the community. They need to start from 5 years old upwards, and they need to be more than just a track and field club. They need to do more.
But the success that we're seeing at the moment, that everyone is celebrating this summer, that will breed more funding, surely, and that would actually, could enhance what you're talking about.
It could absolutely enhance what I'm talking about, and that's the hope. But the funding comes, then, as I'm saying, where is the expertise within, say, for example, the club network that I'm speaking about, to actually then take that money and tackle obesity, to become a community club, a community hub?
So it comes back to the food industry as well, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's another subject altogether, but they have to do more.
Well, absolutely, because, obesity isn't just about a lack of exercise. The number one cause of obesity is a lack of understanding about what is going into your body and what it does when it gets there. So it's educating parents, it's educating everybody in the community about food, and nutrition is key.
OK. Connie Henry, thank you very much indeed. Got to leave it there. Chris.
Thanks, Matt. Well, it wasn't just the Brownlee brothers who won medals for Team GB today. Hannah Mills and Saskia Clark won gold in the women's 470 class sailing event. There were silvers for Liam Heath and John Schofield in the men's 200-metre kayak double. And away from the water, Marcus Ellis and Chris Langridge won bronze in the badminton men's doubles. Great Britain's first ever Olympic medal in the discipline. After the break, the robbery that never was. New video suggests that 4 US swimmers were involved in an altercation at a Rio petrol station and may have made up the claims of being robbed at gunpoint. Welcome back. Now, it was a claim that fed the cliches of crime and violence in Rio and the threats to Olympic competitors. But it now seems those allegations that 4 American swimmers were victims of an armed robbery may have been a fiction. As investigators seek to interview the quartet, new video has emerged showing them not held up at gunpoint by fake policemen, but in a dispute at a petrol station. Here's Jordan Jarrett Bryan.
It's been another successful Olympic Games for the American swimming team. Legendary Olympian Michael Phelps has more than played his part. But this week, it's some of his teammates that have stolen the attention for all the wrong reasons. Ryan Lochte was part of the 4x200-metre gold medal winning team. But after a night out on Sunday in Rio, reports emerged that he and 3 teammates had been robbed on their way home. But there was soon confusion when just hours later, the International Olympic Committee denied anything had happened, quoting the American Olympic Committee, USOC.
All I can tell you is that from USOC, I messaged USOC and they said they spoke to Lochte, who said it wasn't true. So I guess the story may change, but I can only tell you, you need to go to USOC and to Lochte to get the facts.
Those facts Lochte gave in an interview to NBC.
So what happened? The guy pulled out his gun, he cocked it, put it to my forehead, and he said, get down, and I was like, I put my hands up, I was like, whatever. He took our money, he took my wallet.
Hours later, Lochte tweeted a statement reiterating that his story was true. But the police had no record of any robbery being reported. Questions were raised about the allegations, and Brazilian authorities were then ordered by a judge to seize the passports of everyone involved. 2 of Lochte's teammates were dramatically removed from their plane at Rio Airport, but Lochte had already flown home. Later CCTV footage emerged showing the Americans coming out of a petrol station before heading back to their taxi. But after ambling around, they returned to the cab, and 6 minutes later are seen here sitting by a car wash speaking to security staff. Brazilian TV says there are serious holes in Lochte's story. Half an hour later, security footage shows Lochte and teammates returning to the athletes' village in a relaxed mood, just hours after he claimed they'd all been robbed.
Can you say anything?
With 2 of the 4 swimmers involved still being questioned in a Rio police station, Olympic organisers were keen to play down the incident. A Rio 2016 spokesman said, "Let's give these kids a break. Sometimes you take actions that you later regret. They had fun. They made a mistake. Life goes on."
Tonight's main news, Russia has said it will support a 48-hour ceasefire in the besieged Syrian city of Aleppo, following a plea from the UN envoy to Syria. Its agreement followed the release of video of 5-year-old Omran Dutnish being rescued from the rubble of a bombed building and sitting, stunned and bloodied, in the back of an ambulance. Doctors say Omran is now making a recovery.
And we hope to have more from Aleppo tomorrow night and indeed in the following week. That's all we have time for. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great evening. Good night.
Till tomorrow, that's Channel 4 News. Bye-bye.